Shabbat Shalom, happy Friday, and welcome to Living Waters, falling deeper in love with God's Word. I'm one of your hosts, Lauren Cruz.
And I'm Stephanie Pavlantos. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Stephanie, I'll give you a second to share wherever you need to share.
I think
we got it. Okay. Yep. All right. Well, welcome, and thanks for joining us. And we are continuing through the book of Romans. We are, hopefully we'll get to chapter 7 today. I mentioned to Stephanie, 6 was a shorter chapter. Like maybe we could do a whole chapter, but it's thick. It's got some stuff.
It does.
It does.
It's loaded.
Yeah.
Because I think there's things in here that we really haven't been taught. So it deserves to be, shared. Like
I think so.
Understood.
Yeah. So we are going through the Torah class, book of Romans, and it is a pretty deep discussion on Paul and the Roman audience, the church that he's writing to, and just a lot.
I heard something this week, and I forgot to tell you about it before we got on air. But I was listening to the Bima podcast, which is, I went to Romans 1. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with everything he says, but he has a great podcast. And he was talking about Romans 1, and he was talking about what they talked about as far as homosexuality and all of that. And he goes, this is not the homosexuality that we think of in our day and time. And it was kind of like, I'm going to just give it's a PG-13 warning here, but he says that it was more about positions, that if a woman was in a certain position that is a dominant position, it was actually forbidden for women to be in certain positions in a sexual relationship with their husbands. And that was not allowed because she was acting like a man.
Oh, okay.
And so he's talking against that was unnatural. And then he also went on to explain that the Romans had a boy. So what they were, these men had a young, I wouldn't say like a little boy, but a younger boy, probably like right before, preteen type of thing. But they were to teach this boy everything it meant to be a man, and not necessarily in a good sense. And so he would speak against that. So these were some of the things that he is speaking against. It's not like he's not talking about trans. He's not talking about, lesbians, so to speak. What he's talking about is inappropriate behavior.
Yeah, I would think too, like they didn't have a community like we do, like they didn't have marriages. They didn't have, a gay family or a lesbian family or, so that would not have been a common thing. So they were probably
about that.
Right. I would agree with that. And probably also temple worship, I think, would be thrown in there as well. And
so it was interesting. I hadn't heard some of that. I mean, I had heard that when the Bible's talking about a woman acting like a man, it's in that sense. It's
or even I know because a lot of people have talked about even Jonathan and David and all that, and some of the words in that passage are even how Jonathan was taking more of a feminine type of a role, right? And so,
but it was a covenant relationship. So
and so a lot of the rebuke of not able to use that as an example is because they're trying to nitpick on some word nuances, and so curious. Yeah.
So I just thought that was interesting.
It is.
When I was going back and kind of listening to his view on Romans.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Anyway, that's
all right. Well, we got up to right before Romans 5:18. So we do have a couple of verses in chapter 5 we need to finish off, and then maybe we can get through 6. I'm not sure, but we wanted to read this section. Both Stephanie and I, of course, have it highlighted, underlined, and circled in our books. And we don't talk about these things before we get on air. We always seem to underline and circle the same.
We like the same passages.
We do. But there's a reminder here, and I think it's important to remember this because we are going to go into some commonly misunderstood areas and statements in chapter 6. But he says, Paul rightly assumes that anyone reading his letters is directly associated with the congregation to whom he is writing, whether it's Ephesus, Corinth, or Rome. Despite what the institutional church has done with his letters, that is to make them out to be general theological proclamations and teachings applicable to all Christians in all circumstances, this is far from the case. As for centuries, the assertion of theologians has been that when taken together, Paul's letters are an intentional, organized system of Christian theology that Paul is carefully crafting. And he says, I thoroughly deny that this is the case. And, so the statement of, we need to take, and I'm going to say this because this has kind of been a thing that I've really kind of come to understand and agree with, but we are taking more of Paul's statements to frame our theology than even what Yeshua stated. Yeah. And sometimes they seem to contradict each other. They seem to contradict. Right. The more I'm studying Paul, the more I'm thinking, no, they're not really contradicting. But if that is the case, if you want to make the statement of, well, Paul said this and Yeshua said this, I think I would defer to what Christ says, to what our Messiah would say, even over what, Paul would say.
Yeah. And I think that even in the Hebrew roots, you have some who deny that Paul is an apostle, deny Paul's writings and his books. And then you've got Christian denominations that's all they'll read because Paul only wrote to the Gentiles. Right. So there's a lot of bad theology around Paul. Yeah. And you have to take it for what it is, understand it in context, and understand that he is talking to individual assemblies. And if you aren't part of that assembly, then it may or may not apply to you. Right. Because he is definitely talking about the things that they have going on or that they need to understand better. So it's just like the whole, women teaching. He was we take that women should be silent and we make it universal. Right. And very timely for this time that we're in, when he was writing to a very specific congregation that was having trouble with women who were deceived or whatnot, a whole variety of things that are stated. But so we can't just take every word he says and assume that it is all for the modern church today. And I'm not saying it's not, but keep it in context to whom he's talking to and why.
That's right. All right. So we're at Romans 5:18. I'm just going to read 5:18 and 19 together because he doesn't have a huge commentary on verse 18. It says, in other words, just as it was through one offense that all people came under condemnation, so also it is through one righteous act that all people come to be considered righteousness. And again, he's just wrapping up his comparison of Yeshua and Adam. And so verse 19 says, for just as through the disobedience of one man, many were made sinners, also through the obedience of the other man, many were made righteous. So,
and you can see how he switches his language from all people. All people came under condemnation, and through Yeshua, all people come to be considered righteous. Well, obviously, all can, but not all do. So then he kind of changes it up in 19 to the word many instead of all. Right. He said, he makes a comment, the author here, he's like, Paul tend to make a very bold statement and then he walks it back a little bit like, okay, now that I've got your attention, let me tell you what I really meant.
Right. Well, and even a little further down, it says, kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about. Paul is the last one that we should be plucking out his statements and making into church doctrine, because very likely he'll have more to say on that subject, something different about it the next time, or he'll add more to it. So what Stephanie is saying, he's making this bold statement, walking it back and explaining it. He may say something similar in another letter to another church with additional explanation. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then he kind of goes into some of the doctrine where only some people who will be saved and the remainder won't be, or the saved were in some heavenly lottery and elected or predestined by God to be saved. This is a precept that Calvin held, but he's not necessarily saying that's what Paul's not saying that. So, so we must look at an entire chapter at the bottom of 143. But rather we must not only look, I left out an important word, at an entire chapter, but also the entire book or letter he has written. And sometimes we even have to look through all of Paul's letters as a whole to distill his actual theology on any given principle.
Right.
So he makes good points about that.
He does. I think on the next page it says, he even though he was considered apostle to the Gentiles, he was not a Gentile. Paul was still a Jew, the Jew of Jews, and a Pharisee, and highly educated. And I know we've made that statement before. We don't really think about that. Paul's education was like equivalent to somebody who graduated from Ivy League.
Yeah.
And it was his grandfather's, like a tradition, a family tradition of teaching. So,
and he taught with like Hillel's grandson, which Hillel is one of the houses of Hillel and the house of Shammai. So these were Pharisees.
And that's important too, because, and we don't even talk about that in the church when we're reading through different verses and stuff. There were two very I know we had the Pharisees and I know we had the Sadducees, but even within the Pharisees were two very specific, powerful groups, Hillel and Shammai. And depending on who you're talking to and who you're writing to, you're addressing they had different beliefs and how Gentiles could be converted, and how whether or not Gentiles should even be part of grafted in. So
and
if you don't know that, you're going to miss something.
Right. And to make it easier to understand, they're also called the circumcision group in some of the books of Paul's letters, some of Paul's letters.
Judaizers.
Judaizers, you might know them, which that word's not in scripture really, but people call them that. But these are people who were anti-Gentile. So they did not want the Gentiles, but a Gentile had to fully convert into Judaism in order to be saved. And Paul, that's his whole argument in parts of Galatians. No, they do not need to convert to be saved. Saving is through the Messiah, not through Judaism. So to keep it in context, he's arguing with this group of people and their belief system. And that's even the problem with what we see going on with Peter, because Peter was very much afraid and intimidated by some of these same Pharisees, the Shammai Pharisees. So if he saw them come in when he was sitting with the Gentile, he'd get up and walk away. And Paul calls him on it. And so, and that's why Jesus had to even give him that dream about the vision of the sheep, because these are Gentiles. They're not unclean. You can eat with them. You can, share the gospel with them and that kind of thing. So it all comes from that mindset that they were all taught.
That's right. Okay. Anything on 144 that you want to mention?
I think if you want to read Romans 5, 20 and 21.
Yeah. You want me to go ahead and read that? Sure thing.
Yeah.
And the Torah came into the picture so that the offense would proliferate, but where sin proliferated, grace proliferated even more. All this happened so that just as sin ruled by means of death, so also grace might rule through causing people to be considered righteous, so that they might have eternal life through Yeshua, our Lord Jesus Christ. And I don't want to read everything, but it says, And the law came into that the transgression might increase, but where sin increased, grace abounded even more. That's the way we're used to hearing it. So he's kind of setting up.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I thought this was interesting because I think there's a portion in chapter 6 where he kind of ties all this together. But he's really trying to make he's just saying in some ways, and again, he's probably making this point again in chapter 6, but he's basically saying he's not anti-Torah.
Right.
But he goes, if you sin and the only thing that you are relying on is Torah, then you're gonna get the judgment of Torah. But if you sin when you're in relationship with Messiah, then you don't have the judgment of Torah anymore. You have the grace of Messiah.
Right, which is important because so many people are saying, I don't have to follow the law, I'm under grace. And you have to understand, if you're under the law, if you're living to be righteous according to the law, then you're under the law. And sin. So all you have is the law, can judge you for you're either going to live or die, and you don't have life through the law. So and
there's no grace through the law alone.
Right. And so there's no other option other than death. The law brings death. That's what it means. It's not like if I'm following because I understand the grace of God, because I believe in the grace of God, that doesn't mean if I follow the law, then I'm just going to find death, because I'm not following the law for salvation. Paul has been so clear. The law doesn't offer you salvation.
It's what we do because God gave it to us, and we're in covenant with the Father.
Right.
So we keep the covenant by keeping the law of Moses, so to speak. But now when we sin, we have the grace of Yeshua to cover our sin. Right. So we have, of course, if I said the best of both worlds, people will say, no, you don't. But we really do. So we're keeping Torah without the judgment of Torah, because we're in relationship with Messiah. So we have the grace. And a lot of what he's talking about is sinning under one versus sinning under the other.
So a lot of, a Christian will say, well, I have the freedom in, I live under grace and I have freedom. And yes, we do. Yes, we do. But nowhere does it say the law is void. Nowhere does it say. I mean, we try to twist it,
and it's not one and done either.
Right, right. I mean, we try to make gymnastics out of scripture, so it sounds like we don't have to follow the law anymore. But nowhere does Yeshua say that. In fact, he says until it's completely fulfilled, it's not going to
heaven and earth has passed away.
Nothing. Yeah. So we're not disagreeing with Paul. We're agreeing with Paul. And yes, there is grace. And yes, there is forgiveness. And yes, there is a passing over of our sin. And yes, there is a freedom. And he's actually going to talk about that in chapter 6, how we're not slaves anymore to the sin. We can be a righteous person. We can live in faith and under that grace. It is very doable. The sin doesn't have the power over us. But he never says, don't follow the law.
Right. And there's no wrath in Yeshua.
Yes.
There's no wrath of judgment. But there is a wrath if you just rely on the law of Moses. Right. There's going to be a wrath that's going to happen. So, I mean, I've had people say, well, I'm going to pray for you that you find, Jesus. And it's like, I'm following Jesus. I'm following Jesus. Yeah. I believe in grace. So it's so hard.
I think too, I know there's a lot of division, even in the Hebrew roots, even within the Hebrew roots understanding and messianic believers and whatever they want to call, whatever we want to call ourselves, Torah observant, whatever, pursuant. But I think the fundamental understanding is we follow because we're trying to be obedient, and in relationship, we understand and we believe in Yeshua. We believe in the sacrifice. I mean, I think everybody can agree on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And this person makes a comment here. If I can get my cursor to show it. The Jewish people at the time of Jesus and even before, they never had a problem with the Holy Spirit because the Holy Spirit was
God. Yeah.
You know, so they didn't have a problem with the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And they still don't have a trouble with the Spirit of God.
Right.
What they have trouble with is, you know, Yeshua being a man. Right. And so, because they don't see it that way. But I think that we have to understand that, yeah, God is spirit. That is his form, so to speak. So, you know, we don't see him. We don't lay our eyes on him, but we feel his spirit. We feel his presence. But, you know, people have seen Yeshua. You know, I mean, you talk to some children and they have actually seen him. And I've even heard of other people. I mean, I've heard testimonies where, you know, like military men in battles and, you know, whatever. And here comes Jesus, you know. And so, but yeah, so I'm just saying that this is true. They are one and the same, but
yes, I agree. All right. Anything on 44, 45? Do you want me to read anything
on 45? Well, I have stuff, but you know, let's just skip to 45. He has a first and a second. So they're right in the middle, near the top, third. He said first, so he's talking about Torah, and again talking about what we've been talking about. He actually was talking about the word proliferate or something, abound, I think is the word you use. So he's like, this word means to superabound, to increase super abundantly. It's a word that indicates an extreme amount of growth.
So it's hyperbole, which I think that's what we can understand. It's hyperbole, which is just a super exaggeration.
Yeah. So he's like, so first of all, this is a great piece of hyperbole. It is also Paul speaking truthfully and accurately about one narrow aspect of a complex subject, meaning the Torah. He knows, as does anyone who seriously studied the Torah, that the Torah was given as a blessing and gift of life by God to his people. And then he just makes a second point. As exaggerated and negative as Paul made this comment about the purpose of Torah, because he made a comment earlier, like, this is going to really upset the Jews who are reading this.
Right. Yeah.
He knows it's going to upset them. So he said, nonetheless, it exposes a great truth about humanity. It is that the more we're told what not to do, the more we want to do it.
Exactly.
And that is our sinful flesh nature, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So and there's a good paragraph there that starts with the law, but he was basically talking about the natural law, and he refers that again to a lot of the Gentiles as when they're obeying the natural law, that they are essentially obeying God's law.
That's right. So. Okay. I don't really have anything else noted on page 145. So we have now officially made it into Romans 6, and we're hoping, but can we do it in 30 minutes? I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
He does a really good job. So before he even jumps into it, we've got like 2 pages setting the stage, because he defines grace and he defines the Hebrew understanding and the words and everything. But grace is the Hebrew word chesed. We often translate that into grace in our English Bibles, but it means favor. And so we need to understand, like, you can interchange that, and instead of just saying grace, you can say favor, you know, and it's okay to do that.
And we agree that's what Abraham, he found favor with God.
Found favor. That's right. All right. So I have down at the bottom, and I don't want to skip ahead, so if you have anything before this, please jump in, but it says grace involves the notion of favor, but it is Christianity that has taken it one step further to make the definition of grace as unmerited favor. So he has this whole discussion of, for us to receive favor, we like something like he has to look at us and want to give that to us, and want to
there has to be a reason.
Right. There's got to be a reason for us to have favor or this grace extended. It's not just like, here, let me just pass this out. Everybody, one for you, one for you.
Stand in line. Everybody gets it.
That's not the case. It's a reward. It's a response to something that we have said or done or been in relation with him.
And I've also heard that it's covenant loyalty. I thought we read a book that explained it that way. Yeah. And that's important because when he's giving us, was that the word? Yeah, loving kindness. I think this was the word. But it's a type of covenant loyalty. And so what is God doing when he gives us grace or mercy or this loving kindness that we might use? He is displaying his covenant loyalty to us.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify something because I wanted to, I said, he gives out grace as a response to something. It's still not in response to a works or because I was a good person, I get this great. That's not it. But it's a response to a relationship with him, like an acknowledgement of him and like he's going to join into a covenant. What Stephanie is saying, covenants aren't just passed out. Like there has to be an agreement. Like, yes, I want to be in covenant with you. And so it's not a works. It's not me saying like, hey, look what great thing I did. And I'm obedient. Look at me following the rules. But it's an understanding of, yes, I want to be in covenant with you. And I'm agreeing that I can do my part of the deal. And in response to that, I am given his favor.
Yeah, and he even uses the example. He goes, so you walk in the front door and say to your wife, isn't that nice? Our neighbor just did a wonderful favor. And you turn and you walk out of the room.
Yeah.
And your wife's like,
what are you talking about?
Can you finish that sentence?
Yeah.
And so he said, well, what, so the wife goes, well, what did our neighbor do? And so he explains favor or grace must be connected to an identifiable action for it to have any real application or meaning to us. Right. So it's not about works, but it is about an action that, and even if it's our belief, like for Abraham, it was his belief and obedience. And, but it wasn't due to like, just, because, he was a great person, but, it says that, so when we, it has to have an identifiable action for it to have any real application or meaning. So when we say we are saved by grace, it has little actual application until we identify what particular action of grace God did to save us. So when we're saved by grace, if we don't qualify it with he saved us by dying on the cross and shedding his blood.
Right. That's the action. That's the action. Right.
Yeah, that's the action that he did in order to save us. Right. So he just says that Paul repeatedly uses the term grace. He has a specific action in mind that he has previously identified. And what is it that Paul says God did for sinners as an act of grace? He made us righteous. That was his action, not ours. It was his action for us. So
I agree.
Justification is an act of grace.
Yes. Okay. So 2 pages. He goes through 2 pages of that so we can get to Romans 1.
So go ahead and keep doing.
Okay. Romans 1. So then are we to say, let us keep on sinning so that there can be more grace, that can grace abound? If I just sin more, I'm just going to get
that's more. What we're so go ahead and read 2 together, I think.
Yeah. And Paul says, heaven forbid, or may it never be. We've seen it translated that. How can we who have died to sin still live in it?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna read this next one too, because we'll back up. Do you know that those of us who have been immersed into Messiah Yeshua have been immersed into his death?
Yeah. And I saw that on Facebook, so that was good.
I thought that was great.
Yeah. So he kind of gets in now, and he's explaining quite a few things here. So he says right after Romans 6:1, the straw man has created his own regulation. Again, the straw man that we've talked about in the past is what Paul created to argue with. So the straw man has created his own regulation that says believers should be encouraged to keep on sinning so that more grace will abound. And he's like, so then he responds in Romans 2, heaven forbid, like, may it never happen.
Right.
So how can we, if we've died to sin, and then we're going to get into the whole baptism and everything that means, how can we keep living in sin? And that is where a lot of people think, well, he died for my sin now and forever, so it doesn't matter what I do. Well, it does.
It does. Yeah. Okay. I don't
dying to sin. Did you want to explain that? Because that was one of those phrases that
he did talk about that. I don't know what page you're on and what
it's right under Romans 6:2. Sorry.
Romans 6:2.
148.
Oh, 148. I don't think I underlined anything in there.
It's the second paragraph. It says another of
the main doctrines that Paul establishes of what he calls dying to sin. Got it. Okay. Here is one of those phrases or terms that Christians often use, which is not so easy to understand or to explain. One reason is that most Bible commentators don't seem to be able to come up with a single standard definition of what what commentators suggest that Paul means what dying to sin in a number of ways simultaneously. Great pains are made to dying in sin, to Christ's death, to sin in the law, and so on. I see the issue as becoming needlessly complicated within the Christian community because we don't understand it is the Jewish cultural mindset of the first century, an understanding that was widespread and common knowledge among Jewish people, since that Paul is a Jewish scholar, and then we need to look at what he is. So,
and this is where he gets into the evil inclination and good inclination.
And he mentioned this. He mentioned this a little bit in the previous chapter. A very Jewish idea is the two main inclinations of man. We're either going to, and this is why he gets all into the slave of sin or the slave of righteousness.
Two masters. That's why he gets into that two masters.
Right. It's a very common, easily understood, popular idea in this century. They, to have two masters, and also to say you're slave to something would have been very insulting and like the worst of the worst, because slavery was the worst of the worst in the Roman Empire. So he's saying the most fundamental Jewish belief, and still is, that mankind is born with two inclinations. It's where we got the idea of the devil on one shoulder and the angel on another shoulder, right? That's kind of where the fundamentals of that. It says all humans have two opposing God-given inclinations with us. The good inclination is that Yitzer Ha Tov. Tov is good, means good. The evil inclination is Etzer Ha Ra. Ra is evil.
Right.
And so we all have it. It's a God-given inclination. It follows that we also have the freedoms to choose to obey one or the other. This is the Jewish definition of free will and how it's made possible. And in Jewish thought, a human is mastered either by good inclination or in evil inclination. So a master-slave relationship is contemplated, since slavery was a normal and visible part of the Jewish understanding and community of that time. So
so he's talking about the two ways, or the two masters, and this is a doctrine that is out there, and it has, and they base different things about this, and it's a doctrine that we as Christians, Gentile churches, have actually adopted as well. So you have a sin nature and you have a good nature.
Right.
And dying to sin is not necessarily, there was a comment that dying to sin is knowing right from wrong. No, we know right from wrong. It's just who we going to follow. Who are we going to throw our hat to and say, yeah, you're going to be my master. You're going to be the one I follow.
Right.
So we have to die to the evil inclination.
Right.
So that it doesn't become our master. Right. And if we die to it, then it can't become our master. So we literally have to make a conscious effort that we're not following that way. And it also combines with dying to sin is part of the whole immerse, or baptism type of thing. So you can't be a slave to two masters. This is Matthew 6:24.
Right.
Where you either hate the one and love the other, or love the second and scorn, or scorn one and love the first one. So you're going to be loyal to one of them. That is Jesus' word.
And those are Yeshua's words, right? Yeah. That's Jesus's words.
So you can't be a slave to both God and money, because money can be an evil inclination. It can cause us to have evil inclinations.
Yeah.
So he just goes on that since it is the evil inclination that produces sin, then to walk in sin is to be a slave to the master of your evil inclination. So when we walk in sin, we're making sin our master.
This little section kind of struck me. I mean, this whole, and then reading into what baptism really means, it really hit me hard, because he says this inclination or money, and then he puts in quotes, or really the world system. And that's what struck me, because, we're striving, the keeping up with the Joneses, making the money, having a job that you're going to be able to afford, instead of just being a very simpler life. To me, it was a little convicting for me, because I'm like, you're walking in sin if you're striving in the world's system. And I thought that's kind of, because I've put a different master over me, instead of just living a quiet, very simple life.
Yeah. And I just wanted to read this last part, but he said, conversely, to die to sin is to acknowledge a change in masters.
Right.
So we're going to follow our good inclinations.
That's right.
So you cease being a slave to the evil inclination and become a slave to the good inclination. So I thought that was very definitive of explaining what it means to die to sin. We're basically saying, bye-bye, this master. Hello, this master.
Well, I think it kind of, the whole premise of, Jesus was the only one that could follow the law perfectly. Yeah. Okay, yes, could. However, this definitely gives us the power within us, we have the power to die to sin. We have the power, the authority, his authority, to not be a slave to that anymore, and to walk in the Spirit and to walk in his ways.
Yeah.
He turns the corner then, and this adds to this statement that he's making. Romans 6:3, it says, don't you know that you, those of us who have been immersed in Messiah, Yeshua, have been immersed into his death. And so this argument, this line of thought is continuing. Yeah.
Yeah, this was good. And you want to go ahead and just keep going with that?
Sure. Yeah. So he's talking about immersion, and everybody knows immersion is like a part of the mikvah. We know all that, but we've turned it into a very different understanding of baptism. And he uses the word baptismo. And I love this. I wrote this down. I even made a social media post about it. It says the word baptismo is a rather common word in that area, but it didn't have religious undertones that we've given it. Like if you say baptism, the first thing we're going to think of is church, right? In that time, if you said baptism, that was not the first thing they thought about. Right?
No, because the word means immersion. So
it means immersion, but it's meant more than, it's more than a simple dunking. It's not just a little dunk and come back up. It was used in the cloth dyeing industry, which is so cool with Lydia and purple dyeing and all that. I mean, that was a whole nother rabbit trail. But it says an object is put into water or into liquid. And in the cloth industry, it meant to be immerse the cloth into a vat of dye, and the cloth stays there until it takes on the characteristics of that. It takes on the color of the dye. The cloth absorbs the color, and so it becomes the same color. And so that's what baptism is. It's not just a little quick dunk. Let's wash away our sins. Exactly. And you're a newness of Christ. Like there's time you got to hang out. You got to hang out with him, and you've got to begin to really look like him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was good. And then he even gives an example, like when you were baptized in a mikvah, when you went into living water, which was water that was moving and was pure and clear, then you took on the properties of that water. So when you came up out of the water, you were pure. You were, you had rinsed all that stuff away, and now you took on the qualities of that living water. Right. So the same goes when we're baptized in Yeshua. We are being immersed until almost we take on the qualities of him. So when we come up, we've died like we've died like, in a sense, we've died like he has died in a sense. But when we come up, we have now taken on his qualities to live for him and be like him in that way.
Right. And you're dying to the master of the master of sin. You're burying that, you're dying to that. So yeah. I think when you think of it like that, it just seems a little stronger to me when you think of that.
So I thought he wrote this one little sentence, thus, since one of Christ's qualities was that when he died, or is that he died. So when we are baptized, we absorb the quality of his death. Therefore, we can say that we died with him.
Christ. Right. That's right.
So
very good. I'm turning on my heat in here.
Oh,
I'm cold.
My son's calling me. He's got a thing tonight.
Okay. Romans 6:4-5. Through immersion into his death, we were buried with him. There we go. So that just as through the glory of the Father, the Messiah was raised from the dead, likewise we too might live a new life. For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we will also be united with him in a resurrection like his.
Right.
So
again, it's taking on those qualities.
So believers' baptism identifies us symbolically joining Christ on the cross as the means of death, and also of joining him in the grave as the finality of death. Understanding this different symbolism between death and burial will help see what Paul is getting at even more in the next chapter.
Yeah, this part was good, understanding that the finality, of even like he gave the example of when you go and you're burying a loved one. None of it seems like my mom died in the end of May. And so we had her funeral at the beginning of June. So it wasn't until you really like bury her, that you realize, oh, this is final. Like she is gone, So I think it's the same way, what he's describing. So when we realize that we have been buried with him, we died with him, now we're buried with him. Now it's like, it's final. That's the final understanding that is gone. That old life has to be gone.
He makes a statement. He's like, and this is a whole discussion, but is baptism a must or is it optional? And he's really clear. That's not what saves us. I know a lot of people think that it's like that's necessary for salvation. But he's very strong with, at some point, it is a matter of obedience. And at some point, you should be baptized. Because of the finality of it, because that's the final symbol and the just exactly what Stephanie was saying.
Yep.
So
it's interesting, and I don't think we take it seriously enough what it means.
I agree. All right, Romans 6:6. We know that our old self was put to death on the execution stake, which I love that version, with him, so that the entire body or of our sinful propensities might be destroyed and we might no longer be enslaved to sin. Again, same, we're following the same line. He's going through several verses to just make that same point over and over and over again. So in verse 6, Paul asserts that it's our old self that was put to death, and it has to be put to death on the cross or on the stake. That is in baptism. That's what happens in baptism. And we have joined Christ on the cross. And this is the moment that everything that caused us to sin is laid waste so that we're no longer slaves to sin. So it's like that the final point of baptism is the final point that gives us the power that we are no longer slaves to sin. So.
And I like this sentence. He said the old self means all of us, the whole person. So your body, your soul, and your emotions, it's the whole self of who you are, because your body, soul, and emotions, and your whole mental state and everything, outlook on life is going to be tainted by sin and those evil inclinations.
Yeah.
So that all has to die. It's just that right now, the flesh we continue to fight with.
Yeah.
So the soul, not the soul, but the spirit's been changed. But we're going to still struggle until our resurrection with the soul, until our death and then resurrection.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's very interesting to understand it that way. He goes, we must not assume that Paul is saying our old self no longer exists. That old self lingers on to be a challenge to us all of our days. So.
Right. Sadly.
Yep, sadly.
Okay, we are
about the resurrection part. So
yeah. Anything else on 151 you want to mention?
No, he just gets into the it just says the very last sentence on 151, we have been liberated to be able to respond to God and the good inclination within us. So.
Okay. All right, Romans 6, 7 through 11. Look at us, Stephanie. We're going through it. For someone who has died has been cleared from sin. Now, since we died with the Messiah, we trust that we'll also live with him. We know that the Messiah has been raised from the dead, never to die again. Death has no authority over him. For his death was a unique event that need not be repeated, but his life he keeps on living for God. And in the same way, consider yourselves to be dead to sin, but alive for God by your union with Messiah, Yeshua.
Yes. The only thing I have here is right above Romans 6, 12 through 13. It says, hopefully with each passing day, our new life and our identification with Christ increases in its effect, even in this present world. But that is up to us. That is our obligation to see that it happens.
I know that's circled too.
Yeah. So our forgiveness, mercy, compassion, and loving kindness towards our neighbor doesn't come automatically with salvation. We must work at it.
That's a tough one. Yeah. That's right.
And that's true. I was listening to this man on social media, and he was talking about his son, and he just kind of told the story that his little boy hit the dog right in the face, right in its nose. And he goes, the mom brought and said, here, deal with this, and he kind of laughs. He's like, yeah, how come there are kids when they do something wrong, And so he went on, he goes, and he's reminding his son, he goes, who are you? He goes, I don't know. And he goes, yes, you do. We say it every night. You are a child of God. You are kind. You are loving, these things. And he goes, you are kind. That is your identity, because you are a child of God. That is your identity. So now what you happen is you forgot your identity and you acted unkindly because you forgot who you are. And I thought that was such a great way. He goes, don't shame. He's not a bad boy. He just did something that was unkind.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make him a bad boy. So we try to take what somebody has done and identify them with what they have done instead of seeing they lost sight of their true identity in Messiah.
That's a good one. That'll preach.
So
that's a good one.
Don't be too hard on yourself. You've lost sight.
Well, I don't want to jump ahead, but I underlined this little section over on 153 because it goes what you're saying. It says, as believers, we still carry the residue of our past sins with us, and so we behave out of instinct in a knee-jerk reaction more than in relation to our new reality.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm gonna, as a teacher, because Jeff had a rough day today. He got fussed at because he told a kid to sit down, stop moving around, and he was very firm with this kid. The kid complained, said that he embarrassed him, and so Jeff had to I said, listen, you weren't wrong. Like, you got to control. He got 40 kids in a class. You got to control the situation. He goes, no. He goes, I could have acted better. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, don't you dare think you did something wrong in that matter. He goes, no, I know, I'm the adult. I could have not. And I go, listen, you talk to him just like you talk to your own kids, which you say things quick to even to your own children. Sit down, go sit down, stop talking, but in a school system, you're supposed to have control all the time. So, that was a knee-jerk reaction of getting all your buttons pushed at the same time.
Yeah.
And you forget for a moment, you lose it for a moment.
Exactly. So, yeah. And we all do. It's no one. And that's why don't identify others by that knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah.
But give them a chance, or at least explain, hey, that is not your new identity.
Right.
And that's the best way I thought to explain it. It's like you lost sight of your identity. Let's get it back.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. I agree. All right. What else?
What else? 6:12 through 13. We didn't read that one yet.
12 through 13. Therefore, do not let sin rule in your mortal bodies so that it makes you obey its desires, and do not offer any part of yourselves to sin as an instrument of wickedness. On the contrary, offer yourselves to God as people alive from the dead, and your various parts to God as instruments for righteousness. And so we're dead. We should act dead to sin. And now we should begin aligning ourselves and offering ourselves to our new master.
Yeah. And it says right there, do not let sin rule. So for people to say,
the devil made me do it.
Yeah. Or I don't sin because he's already saved me from my sin. So I'm not sinning. Well, yes, you are. Yeah. When you continually break the 10 commandments,
right?
Because they haven't gone away. God, Jesus actually quotes from them. So, you can't assume that it's a one and done thing. It is a working it out. We must be rid of sin to the best of our ability. We're not going to be perfect. We can't be. We're not. But we have to keep working. I'm not going to react that way. I'm going to respond, not react, and that kind of thing.
That's a
I'm
tough
not going to get triggered by this. I don't want that. That's not who I'm going to be.
Yeah.
So this was a good thing here on 153. It's in this, like the first full paragraph in the middle of the page. It says, in fact, we must fight our lingering sinful tendencies as rebels fight against an evil tyrant. Right. When we feel ourselves slipping back to the behavior and mindset of our old self, which in reality exists for us only as a memory.
As a memory. Yeah. Interesting.
So we have to learn self-control. We have to consciously control what our bodies see, what they hear, what they touch, what they say, what they eat, what they drink, and what they do. And again, it's taking control. And that's, again, we can go over, dietary laws. It was a way. I mean, what was the first dietary law? Do not eat from this tree. And he broke it.
Yeah.
So there's always rules that God has for our bodies, for our souls, for our spirits, all of these things, because he wants us to be pure.
Right. Okay, let's roll on. He is offering us Romans 6:14 in different versions. I don't know which one I should read.
I just read them all.
Okay. Yeah. This is the Jewish Bible, which is the one that he's quoting from.
Complete Jewish Bible.
Yeah, complete Jewish Bible. For sin will not have authority over you because you are not under legalism, but under grace. Okay. This is the verse that everybody's like, this is it. Okay. So one version says, sin will not have authority over you because you're not under legalism, but under grace. Okay. For sin shall not be master over you, for you are not under law, but under grace. Okay. And then the King James Version says, for sin shall not have dominion over you, for ye are not under the law, but under grace. So he shows us different versions on how this has been how it's changed. Yeah.
And King James is the least correct here, because there is no "the" in the original Greek.
The law. Yeah.
It's just law. Under law. So it's not talking about the law of Moses.
The law. Right.
Okay. So that's the first thing. So when you put a "the" in there, it's, it's a definite article. So it's talking about a very definite thing, but that word's not there. So
the law is not capitalized.
Yeah.
And usually when you're discussing the Sinai law, it's capitalized, and it's not capitalized here.
So the NAS, for sin shall not master over you, for you are not under law, but under grace. And so again, this goes back to what I was saying when we were still at the end of 5. It's about sinning under the law versus sinning under grace.
Right.
That is what this verse is about.
Yes. Yeah.
If you don't take anything else with you today, that is what that verse is about.
Right. If you're
cannot have authority over us.
Right.
Because we're not sinning under the law or under legalism.
Law. Right.
We are sinning under grace from now here on out, once we have Messiah living within us, or the Holy Spirit. So now we are sinning under grace. And so it's treated differently.
It is.
Not that there's no, and I think the biggest thing that we have to understand is, while God may not punish us for that sin, there's still the law of reaping and sowing. Mm-hmm. So we will still experience the consequences of bad seed, of bad sowing. That's a universal law that we can't get away with, can't get away from either. So.
Yeah, he even says it on page 156. It says, so it seems clear that we as believers are not under the curse of the law. It's not an issue of the law itself. The curse of the law comes from disobeying the law. Disobeying the law is defined throughout the Bible, Old Testament, as sinning. The curse that results from sinning is God's wrath, and God's wrath against us results in our eternal death. Mm-hmm. So we do not have to experience the final determination of God's wrath and eternal
death. So
death.
We need to stop, but I think we should start on 155 next week, because I'd like to talk about that C.E.B. Cranfield's commentary.
Okay. All right. Well, we are out of time. We almost did it. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys live next week. I appreciate you guys for joining with us.
Thank you. Shalom. Shabbat shalom.
If you missed today's show and want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all of the other live Lamb show archives on the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Stephanie Pavlantos, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.